The shot hadn't come yet, just the sound of footsteps. A man in black stormed down the church aisle, gun raised toward the altar. The children screamed. The nuns ducked. And Lauren, the blind woman who taught piano in this orphanage, did something no one expected. Her hand darted across the table. She grabbed a glass bottle, didn't hesitate, and threw it. It struck the attacker square in the temple. One perfect hit. He dropped instantly. Silence. Elias, standing near the pews, froze. He had drawn his weapon too, but he'd seen it. Every fraction of a second. Her precision, her aim, the impossible accuracy of that throw. His gaze lingered on her, his pulse heavy with disbelief. How could a blind woman hit a moving target without missing? The sound of shattering glass still echoed when he muttered under his breath, "Who the hell are you, Lauren?" Her hands trembled, her face turned away, and for the first time in 9 years she realized someone had finally seen her. If you're already feeling the tension in the air, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss another love story that breaks your heart before it heals it. Now tell me, my dear listener, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country in the comments. Let's see how far love travels. The rain fell in silver sheets over St. Helena's orphanage, soaking the courtyard and blurring the city lights into halos of gold. Inside, the world was still. Warm candlelight, children's laughter echoing down narrow halls, and the soft thud of a cane tapping across the worn wooden floor. Lauren Vega moved slowly between the rows of tiny benches, her white cane sweeping gently before her. Her other hand rested on a small boy's shoulder as he fumbled over the piano keys. "Try again," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but her heart was elsewhere, anchored to something she could never speak of. The melody wobbled, wrong note, wrong rhythm, but she smiled anyway. "You're doing fine, Henry. Feel the keys, not the sound. Let your fingers remember." 9 years. 9 years of blindness. 9 years of pretending not to see the world that had stolen everything from her. She had built her silence carefully, like a fortress of folded hands and unspoken truths. Outside, tires hissed against wet stone. A sleek black car pulled up to the orphanage gate, headlights cutting through the rain. The driver stepped out first, opening the rear door with quick, practiced efficiency. From the shadows, Elias Moretti emerged, the man whose name carried weight and warning in every corner of the city. The storm seemed to bend around him, thunder muting itself in his presence. His shoes left no sound on the wet pavement. He wasn't dressed for prayer. Tailored coat, cufflinks like polished bullets, an umbrella held loosely in his gloved hand. Inside the orphanage, Father Mateo looked up from his ledger as the door opened. A gust of cold air swept in, scattering candlelight. "Mr. Moretti." The priest's tone faltered between caution and gratitude. "It's been a long time." Elias nodded once. "I keep my promises." His voice was low, unhurried. "You gave me a bed once. You fed me when I had nothing. I don't forget debts." He set a slim envelope on the table, white paper sealed with black wax. Father Mateo hesitated before taking it. "You didn't have to." "I did." Elias's gaze drifted to the walls, children's drawings pinned up in uneven rows, the faint scent of incense and floor polish. "Consider it an investment in the innocent." The priest's brows knit. "And what do you hope to earn, Mr. Moretti?" Elias's mouth curved, something too sharp to be a smile. "Peace," he said simply, and stepped past him into the main hall. Lauren didn't notice the door open. She was guiding Henry's small hands again, her own trembling slightly. The sound of rain drowned out everything else, until she heard that voice. A voice like gravel wrapped in silk. A voice she hadn't heard since the night her world ended. Her breath caught. The piano note slipped sour beneath her fingertips. "Miss Lauren?" Henry whispered, confused by her sudden stillness. She forced her shoulders to relax. "Keep playing, sweetheart." But her pulse wouldn't obey. Her skin prickled. The air thickened around her, each beat of her heart echoing with the memory of that night. Her father shouting her name, the crash of glass, the sharp crack of gunfire, followed by that same voice giving the order to leave no witnesses. Her hand clenched around the cane. Her eyes, those carefully blank eyes, turned instinctively toward the sound of footsteps entering the room. Elias stopped near the piano. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence filled the space, dense and magnetic. The children's chatter dimmed to nervous whispers. Father Matteo approached quickly, wiping his hands on his robe. "Mr. Moretti is here to make a donation, children. Say thank you." A chorus of small voices followed, uncertain but obedient. Lauren bowed her head, her throat tight. She could feel him behind her now, the faint heat of his nearness, the slow rustle of his coat. The piano stood between them. Elias reached out, almost absent-mindedly, and pressed one of the keys. A single note rang out, deep, resonant, the same sound that had once trembled through her living room before the blood came. Lauren flinched violently. Her hand knocked against the keyboard, sending a scatter of wrong notes into the quiet hall. The children gasped. Father Matteo turned, startled. "Lauren? I'm sorry," she said quickly, forcing a small smile. "The thunder startled me." But there was no thunder now, only the steady rain and the echo of that note. Elias studied her in silence. The priest continued to speak, thanking him, praising his generosity, but Elias's attention never wavered. Something about the woman, the stillness in her, the way she seemed both fragile and unbreakable, caught him off guard. He noticed her eyes then, wide, pale, unseeing, blind. She turned slightly, facing away. He couldn't tell if it was fear or indifference, but she did not flinch again. The cane in her hand tapped once, steady, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. Elias let his gloved fingers rest lightly on the piano lid. "Take care of them, Father," he murmured. "The world doesn't forgive softness." Then he moved away, his footsteps fading toward the door. Lauren's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She could hear the faint creak of the hinges, the murmur of goodbyes, the muffled roar of the car engine outside. When the sound disappeared into the rain, she finally let go of the keys. Her palm was slick with sweat. The children had already returned to their music, their laughter fragile but persistent. Lauren sat very still. The storm beyond the windows swelled and broke, wind howling like a ghost through the corridors. She lifted her face, eyes unfocused, searching the direction where he had stood moments before. The scent of rain and cologne still lingered, a cruel perfume of memory. Her lips parted as if to speak his name, but she caught herself. No one must ever know she remembered. No one must ever see her see. The rain pressed harder against the glass, drumming like a heartbeat she could not escape. She reached out and touched the piano again, the same key he had pressed. The sound bloomed and faded, a note suspended between past and present, guilt and longing. And in that silence, she almost lifted her head, almost let her eyes open fully, almost saw him. Almost. The storm swallowed the rest. Have you ever hidden a truth so big it could destroy the person you love? Morning light broke through the cracked windows of St. Helena's orphanage, spilling across the wooden floor like thin gold threads weaving through dust. The storm from the night before had left everything soaked, stone walls glistening, rose bushes dripping, the world rinsed clean but not quite calm. Inside, Lauren Vega began her day the same way she always did, quietly, methodically, unseen. The children had learned her rhythm well, the faint click of her cane on the floorboards, the sound of her measured breathing, the warmth in her smile, even when her eyes didn't quite meet theirs. She moved through the halls, collecting laundry, tidying tables, humming softly under her breath. To the world, she was just a blind woman devoted to service. But every sound, every shadow mattered to her. She saw with her memory. She listened to survive. In the garden behind the chapel, she knelt in the damp soil, trimming wilted leaves from the lilies. Her fingers brushed the petals like one might touch the pages of a sacred book. These were her moments of peace, the only ones that didn't feel borrowed. Verena, another caretaker, leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You're out early again," she teased. "Trying to save the flowers before the children destroy them?" Lauren smiled faintly. "They only step on them because they forget to look down." "Some of us forget to look up too," Verena said softly, but Lauren only kept pruning. Beneath the humor, there was always that unspoken tension between them, a gentle care mixed with pity Verena didn't realize she gave. People always thought blindness was the saddest thing about Lauren. None of them knew she'd chosen it. When the church bell tolled for morning prayers, Lauren rose, brushing soil from her skirt. She reached for her cane, but her hand hesitated midway, her fingers grazing instead the corner of a locked violin case hidden behind a potted fern. She paused, heart heavy with the memory that lived inside it. A promise she'd made to herself 9 years ago. She would never tell the truth until she had proof, until she could expose the men who killed her father and burned her name out of existence. Inside that violin case was all she had left of him, a flash drive, encrypted and buried beneath false lining, holding the evidence he died to protect. Until the day came to use it, she would remain what she had become. Lauren Vega, the blind caretaker, the invisible ghost in plain sight. The sound of engines echoed faintly beyond the gates. Even before Verena peeked outside, Lauren already knew. The air changed when power arrived. "The black car's back," Verena murmured. "The Moretti man again." Lauren's breath hitched, though her face stayed composed. She bent down, smoothing the soil with her bare hand as though nothing had changed. In the courtyard, Elias Moretti stepped from his car, dressed in dark gray this time. No umbrella, just confidence and rain on his shoulders. He moved like someone who didn't have to announce himself, the kind of man whose silence commanded more than words ever could. The priest greeted him quickly, but Elias's eyes were already sweeping the grounds. He looked not for God, but for something, or someone, he couldn't name. When he caught sight of the garden, he paused. The woman from last night, the one who had flinched at a single piano note, who hadn't trembled at his presence otherwise. She was kneeling again, her face turned toward the sun she couldn't see. He stayed by the stone railing for a while, watching her from a distance. The way she moved was deliberate, each gesture purposeful, gentle. People in his world didn't move like that. They rushed, they demanded, they killed. Father Mateo began speaking about funding repairs, but Elias's mind had already drifted. He left the priest mid-sentence, crossing the path toward the garden. Lauren straightened instinctively when she heard footsteps, steady, heavy, confident. The sound she'd been dreading since dawn. He stopped near the fountain. She could feel his shadow fall across her. The faint scent of cedar and smoke brushed against the wet air. She turned slightly, cane in hand, her expression serene. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile as a string pulled too tight. Finally, Father Mateo called from across the yard. "Miss Lauren, Mr. Moretti was hoping to see the chapel. Would you show him the way?" Lauren's pulse skipped. "Of course, Father." Her fingers tightened around the cane as she stepped forward, her shoes whispering against the cobblestone. She felt Elias follow a pace behind her, his silence louder than the rain dripping from the eaves. Inside the chapel, candles flickered. The air smelled of wax and incense. She led him past the pews toward the altar, explaining softly where the restoration work had begun. Her words were simple, polite, nothing revealing, nothing dangerous. He walked beside her now, eyes tracing the curve of her face. He noticed how she never looked at him directly, how her lashes fluttered when she paused between sentences. When she reached the piano at the side of the hall, the same one from last night, she hesitated. Her hand hovered above the keys but didn't touch them. Elias stopped beside her, gaze flicking from her fingers to her unfocused eyes. He couldn't explain it, but something in her steadiness unnerved him. He'd spent years surrounded by fear, men who bowed, women who flattered, but this woman neither begged nor trembled. "Father Mateo tells me you've been here nearly a decade." His voice came low behind her, more observation than question. She inclined her head, not facing him. "It feels shorter. Time moves differently when you don't watch it pass." He said nothing more. She could feel his presence. Large, composed, unyielding. She wondered if he could hear the tremor she fought to hide. When the priest returned to thank him for his generosity, Elias merely nodded, leaving another envelope on the altar before turning toward the doors. But at the threshold, he stopped. For one strange, inexplicable second, he looked back. Lauren was still standing by the piano, her hand resting lightly on the lid, her eyes turned toward the candles. Her lips moved faintly, as if whispering a prayer. Elias didn't believe in prayers, but something about that quiet figure stayed with him as he stepped out into the sunlight. The driver opened the car door. Elias paused again before entering, glancing once more at the orphanage, then shut himself inside without a word. From the window above, Lauren heard the car leave. Only when the sound disappeared did she exhale, shoulders shaking. She returned to the garden, knelt in the dirt, and pressed her palm to the ground as though steadying herself against the earth itself. Verena found her moments later, kneeling in silence beside the lilies. "You all right?" Lauren nodded slowly. "Just remembering why flowers grow even when the soil's been turned." Her friend smiled faintly, not understanding. But Lauren wasn't thinking of flowers. She was thinking of ghosts, of a man's voice that once commanded her father's death and now echoed in her sanctuary. She touched the violin case hidden behind the fern again. The lock was still secure. Her secret was still safe. For now. Yet something deep within her shifted, like a door creaking open after years of silence. She didn't know why he'd returned. She only knew he would come again. And when he did, she would have to remember how to keep pretending she couldn't see him. The chandeliers dripped light across the marble hall, scattering gold over sequined gowns and crystal glasses. The annual St. Helena Charity Gala had never gleamed brighter, or hidden so much danger beneath its polished surface. Lauren stood near the edge of the crowd, her white cane resting beside her chair, her posture composed. The children's choir she had trained sang softly at the front, their voices rising like a fragile prayer against the clinking of cutlery and murmured conversations. She wore a simple navy dress that brushed her ankles, her dark hair pinned loosely at the back. To everyone else, she was the orphanage's quiet music teacher, a gentle blind woman who spoke little and smiled easily. To herself, she was a ghost walking through borrowed light. The gala wasn't her idea. Father Mateo had begged her to attend. "They adore your students, Lauren," he'd said. "It helps people give when they see what their kindness supports." She hadn't argued, though crowds made her uneasy. She had learned long ago that people's eyes could be sharper than knives. A deep voice cut through the hum of chatter, smooth but commanding. Elias. He had arrived late, of course. His presence sent an invisible ripple through the room. Conversations dimmed. Even laughter changed shape, softer, more careful. Lauren didn't need sight to feel it, the sudden shift in energy, the restrained fear. "Mr. Elias, we're honored to have you," Father Mateo said warmly. "Your generosity keeps this place alive." Elias murmured something polite, but his gaze was already searching, scanning the tables. And then he saw her, the woman from the orphanage garden, sitting near the choir, head tilted toward the music, her face calm, distant. He shouldn't have noticed her again. He told himself that. But he did. Lauren sensed him before the priest introduced them. The rhythm of the room changed when he was near, like a heartbeat speeding up for no reason. "Miss Lauren," Father Mateo said, beaming. "You remember our patron from the other day. Mr. Elias came tonight to hear the children's performance." Lauren rose slightly, bowing her head. "We're grateful for your support." Her voice was low, soft enough to disappear into the music. Elias studied her closely. She didn't fidget, didn't lower her face too much, just enough to appear modest. Her stillness intrigued him more than words could. He offered a nod she couldn't see. "They sing well," he said. "They sing with hope," she replied simply. He almost smiled, almost spoke again, but someone called his name from across the room. He stepped away, leaving her to the children's choir and the uneasy flutter in her chest. As the evening deepened, waiters carried trays of wine and laughter thickened. Lauren stayed close to the children, listening for off-key notes, giving quiet cues when needed. Then, without warning, the music fractured. A crash, glass breaking. Shouts erupted from the entrance. Lauren froze, every sound sharpened. "Down!" someone yelled. Gunfire followed, sharp, merciless cracks slicing through the air. Screams filled the hall. The children ducked under the piano as panic spread. Lauren dropped to her knees, clutching the nearest child to her chest. Her ears caught everything, the scrape of boots, the breathless command of a man shouting orders, the metallic click of a weapon being reloaded. Her pulse thundered. She'd heard that sound before, long ago, a rival gang, retaliation. She knew the rhythm of chaos all too well. A waiter stumbled past her, knocked over a tray of bottles. A man with a gun turned toward the noise. One of the children whimpered. Lauren didn't think. Her hand closed around a glass bottle rolling across the floor. In one smooth motion, she rose and hurled it. The bottle struck the gunman's wrist with perfect precision. The weapon clattered away. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then, more shouting. The children cried louder. The gunman staggered back, clutching his wrist, stunned, not just from pain but disbelief. Who throws like that? Elias saw it all. He had drawn his own weapon when the first shot rang out, instinct driving him to shield Father Mateo. But his eyes had caught the movement, the blind woman who never missed. He fired once, taking down the attacker before the man could recover. Then his focus snapped back to her. Lauren stood trembling, her hand empty now, her breathing shallow. She could feel the weight of his stare like fire against her skin. Sirens echoed distantly. The chaos began to subside. When the authorities arrived, Elias stayed close to the priest, handling questions with practiced ease. "It's over," he said quietly, though his gaze never left Lauren. Later, after the hall was cleared and the children were safe, Lauren slipped away to the chapel. The place was empty, candlelight flickering against the walls. She knelt before the altar, her cane beside her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. She had been careful for 9 years, careful never to reveal what she could do. And now, in a moment of panic, she'd exposed herself. She pressed her palms together until they hurt, whispering under her breath, "Father, forgive me." Footsteps echoed behind her, heavy, deliberate. Elias. She knew before he spoke. The air changed around him, dense, watchful, silent as the calm before a storm. He stopped a few paces behind her. He didn't interrupt her prayer. He only watched. Lauren tried to steady her breathing, her eyes fixed on the candlelight. But something inside her shifted when she felt his presence draw closer. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to notice her. The candle nearest to her flickered as he moved to the side, standing just at the edge of her vision. She kept her head bowed, pretending she couldn't sense him. Then, unintentionally, her gaze followed his movement across the marble floor. Elias saw it, the way her eyes tracked the faintest shift of shadow. Not blind. He didn't say a word. His jaw tightened slightly. The faintest crease appeared between his brows. He turned and walked away without a sound. Lauren stayed kneeling, her breath trapped in her chest. When the chapel doors closed, She let her head fall forward, tears burning behind her lashes. The damage was done. The man whose voice haunted her past now had a reason to look closer, and if he did, he would find everything she'd fought to bury. The rain began again outside, tapping softly against the stained glass windows. If you were Elias, would you confront her truth or protect her lie? The days following the gala passed like smoke through glass, visible but untouchable. The newspapers spoke of heroism, of panic, of Elias stepping forward to protect the church and children, but no article mentioned the woman who had thrown a bottle with impossible accuracy. Lauren stayed silent, as always. The truth she knew had no home in the world she lived in, but silence did not protect her this time. 3 mornings after the attack, the black car returned. It waited outside St. Helena's gate, its engine purring like something alive. Verena spotted it first and froze. "He's here again," she whispered. Lauren didn't turn toward the window. Her pulse quickened, but her voice stayed even. "For another donation." Verena's lips thinned. "No one donates 3 times in a week, Lauren, especially not men like him." Moments later, Father Mateo entered the corridor with a folded envelope and a grave look. "Lauren," he said gently, "Mr. Elias asked if you would assist him for a short while. He claims it's for your safety. You were close to the incident and his security team insists it might not be over." Lauren's breath caught. "He wants me to go with him?" The priest nodded. "Temporarily. He's offering protection and compensation for the orphanage." Verena stepped forward. "No," she said sharply. "You can't go with him. He's not a man of mercy, Father." Father Mateo hesitated, torn. "He's powerful, yes, but perhaps this is his way of making amends." Lauren turned her face slightly toward the sound of the car outside. Her heart knew what her mind could not accept. This wasn't mercy. It was curiosity. He had seen something that night, and now he wanted answers. She gathered her shawl, her hands trembling just once before she steadied them. "If it keeps the children safe," she said softly, "I'll go." The city beyond the orphanage walls roared with life. Steel, smoke, and sirens. From the back seat of Elias's car, Lauren listened to the hum of traffic, the low vibration of tires on wet asphalt. Elias sat across from her, silent, watching. The partition glass glimmered between them like a veil. When the car stopped at the estate gates, Lauren's throat went dry. The mansion rose out of the rain like something carved from shadow. High walls, arched windows, guards who didn't hide their guns. Inside, everything was quiet marble and gold. Too clean, too empty. The air itself seemed to listen. A servant led her through the hall to a smaller sitting room. Wine bottles lined the shelves. A fire burned low in the grate. Elias entered soon after, removing his coat. "You'll stay here for now," he said. "My staff will assist you. You won't return to St. Helena's until I'm certain the threat is gone." Lauren nodded once. "Thank you." He poured himself a glass of wine and turned toward her. "Do you drink?" She hesitated. "No." "You should learn," he murmured. He placed the bottle and glass in her hands, his fingers brushing hers. "Pour it without spilling." Her pulse skipped. The weight of the glass tilted, her hand trembling faintly. She heard his voice close behind her, steady, patient, commanding. "Slowly. It's not a test." The scent of the wine filled the room, sharp and dark. She managed it perfectly. He took the glass from her, his hand lingering for half a breath. "You're a quick learner," he said. "And you enjoy watching people prove themselves," she replied quietly. A corner of his mouth curved. "I do." Their gazes didn't meet, but something heavier passed between them, an unspoken challenge neither dared name. Later that evening, the rain returned, tapping softly against the tall windows. Lauren sat at the grand piano in the corner of the hall, fingers tracing its edges. Elias entered without a sound, standing at the threshold, arms folded. "I didn't know you played," he said. "I don't," she lied. "I listen." He stepped closer. "Then listen with me." He took a seat beside her. The air seemed to still. For a long moment, neither spoke. Lauren reached out, pressing one key, soft, uncertain. Then another. Elias watched her face as each note fell into the silence. He noticed how she leaned slightly, how her breath caught on a certain chord, as if the music awakened something she had buried deep. When the song ended, he said quietly, "You play like someone who's lost something." Lauren lowered her head. "We've all lost something." He didn't argue. Instead, he closed his eyes, listening as the rain merged with the fading echo of the piano. For the first time in years, he allowed stillness to exist without control. Lauren's voice broke the silence. "You don't like music, do you?" "I used to," he said, "before I learned that silence tells the truth better." She tilted her head. Maybe silence just hides the truth better. He looked at her then, truly looked, and something dangerous stirred beneath his calm exterior. The following morning, Camden found him in the study. "You're getting too close," he said, blunt as always. "That woman isn't what she seems." Elias didn't glance up from the papers on his desk. "No one is." "She's lying. You saw what she did at the gala. Blind women don't throw bottles with sniper precision. My men checked her background. There's nothing, no history before St. Helena's. She just appeared 9 years ago." Elias's jaw tightened. "So she's cautious. That doesn't make her a threat." Camden stepped forward, voice low. "Or it makes her a spy. From Valenti's side, maybe. They'd send someone innocent looking to get close." Elias finally looked up. His eyes were unreadable. "Leave her to me." Camden exhaled. "Don't let her play you, boss." When he left, Elias sat back in his chair, fingers drumming against the desk. He wanted to believe his instincts, but his instincts were split between logic and fascination. That night, Lauren sat by the open balcony, feeling the wind move through the curtains. The city lights shimmered far below. Verina's voice echoed in her mind. "He's the devil who burned your world." And yet, the devil had shown her gentleness no man ever had. She looked down at her hands, steady, graceful, capable, and hated how easily he had disarmed her without a touch. She rose, walking to the piano again, letting her fingers rest on the keys. Behind her, the door opened. She didn't turn. Elias's voice was low. "You shouldn't leave the balcony open at night." "I like the air," she said. "Air won't protect you." She smiled faintly. "Neither will walls." He stepped closer, stopping just behind her. The space between them was a single breath. For a moment, Lauren almost looked up, almost let him see the truth in her eyes. But fear stopped her. "Why are you really here?" she asked softly. Elias hesitated. "Because I can't stop wondering what you're hiding." Her fingers pressed a trembling note. He heard it break in the air like confession. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, the silence between them deepened until it felt like something alive, dangerous, waiting. Neither spoke again. But both understood that something irreversible had already begun. If you were Elias, would you confront her truth or protect her lie? The storm outside had turned violent again. Wind slamming against glass, rain spilling like shards of glass down the tall windows of Elias's study. Lightning cut through the darkness, flashing across his face as he stood before a wall of screens, eyes fixed on one frozen image. 9 years ago? The footage had been buried in the old syndicate archives, records from a job his father ordered long before Elias took power. A political cleansing, the file called it. One of many. But this one had a name. Victor. Lauren's father. He pressed play again, though he could hardly breathe. The camera shook, black and white chaos filling the frame, men shouting orders, glass breaking, a gunshot echoing through a dining hall. Then, through the smoke, he saw her. A teenage girl crawling across the marble floor, blood streaking her hands. Her father lay beside her, lifeless. She was screaming, clutching his shirt, begging for help that never came. Elias's stomach turned as the camera panned just enough to reveal the man giving the final command. His own father. And behind him, Camden, younger, expression unreadable. Elias froze the frame again. Lauren's terrified face stared back at him, eyes wide and bright with a life that hadn't yet been shattered. He stepped closer to the screen, his reflection merging with hers until it looked as though she were staring at him through time itself. He whispered, voice low and raw, "It was us." His hand trembled on the keyboard. He'd thought her secret was espionage, some rival plot. But no, she wasn't a spy. She was a survivor. And he, his family, had been the monster that made her blind herself to the world. Lauren woke before dawn to the sound of piano music. A melody she hadn't heard before, rough, uneven, as if the instrument itself were unsure of the notes. She followed the sound quietly through the corridor until she reached the open door of the study. Elias sat at the piano, shoulders tense, eyes unfocused. The fire burned low behind him, painting his face in flickering amber light. He stopped playing when he felt her presence. "You shouldn't walk around alone," he said without looking up. "I heard music," she murmured. "I thought it was the rain." He turned then, eyes hollow. "It's an old song. My mother used to play it before she left. I thought I'd forgotten the keys." Lauren moved closer, fingers brushing along the edge of the table until she stood beside him. "You remembered." "Some things," he said. "You remember even when you wish you couldn't." Their silence stretched, fragile as glass. Then, in a tone barely above a whisper, he asked, "Lauren, what do you see when you look at me?" Her breath caught. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I need to know if you see what I am, or what I've done." He rose from the piano, pacing toward the window. The stormlight carved harsh lines across his face. 9 years ago, he said quietly, a man died because my father wanted him gone. And a girl survived when she wasn't supposed to. Lauren went still. His voice broke, trembling with restraint. "I saw her tonight, on a recording. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her knuckles turned white around the edge of the piano." Elias turned, eyes burning. "It was you, wasn't it?" Her breath came out shaky. "You shouldn't have looked." He closed the distance between them, not with anger, but with something far worse. Grief. "You've been here all this time," he said. "Under my roof, in my care. And I didn't see it." Lauren's lips parted, but no sound came. Her silence said everything. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "You weren't the one who killed him, Elias, I know that. But I heard your father's voice that night. I remembered every word." He looked at her then, something like shame and sorrow twisting through him. "And mine sounds like his." She nodded once, painfully slow. The storm roared louder outside, thunder shaking the glass. Elias sank onto the edge of the piano bench, head in his hands. "You should hate me," he whispered. "I tried," she said softly. "But then you showed me the man you became, not the one he raised." Her words broke him. He lifted his gaze, wet, unguarded, shattered, and saw her weeping not from fear, but love. He reached for her hand, hesitated halfway. "If I could change the past—" "You can't," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "And neither can I. All we can do is survive it." For the first time in years, Elias let himself cry. Lauren stepped closer and rested her palm gently against his shoulder. The storm outside seemed to fade. For a fleeting second, they were just two souls caught between guilt and forgiveness. Then, the world crashed back in. The front gates exploded open. Gunfire erupted outside. Guards shouted orders. The lights in the study flickered and died. Elias snapped upright, instinct returning like lightning. "Stay here," he ordered, reaching for his gun. But before Lauren could protest, the door burst open. Smoke filled the hallway. A shadow moved through it. Pierce, his rival. "Looking for me?" Elias snarled, firing a shot. Pierce ducked behind the doorway, laughing. "Not this time, Moretti. I'm here for the girl." Lauren's heart stopped. Before Elias could react, two men rushed in from the side entrance. They grabbed her, dragging her toward the hall. She screamed, kicking, but one blow to her ribs sent her collapsing into darkness. Elias fired again, hitting one of the men. "Lauren!" he roared. But by the time he reached the corridor, she was gone. The storm swallowed the sound of the car tearing away down the driveway. He fell to his knees beside the shattered glass, rage and terror twisting through him. Pierce's voice echoed from the distance, mocking, fading. "9 years ago, your father made a girl disappear. I just finished his work." Elias punched the floor, blood staining his knuckles. "No," he whispered. "Not her." He staggered to his feet and looked toward the security feed. Static danced across the screens, then cleared just long enough for one final image. Lauren's face, unconscious, her photo already uploaded, flashing across a dozen news channels. Blind music teacher missing. Connection to Mafia suspect uncovered. The city was already watching. And now everyone knew who she really was. The girl who had survived his father's crime was no longer a ghost. She was the most wanted truth in his world. Outside, lightning tore the sky in half. Inside, Elias stood alone in the wreckage of his empire, the stormlight burning in his eyes. His father's sins had come for him at last, and this time, he would not let them take her too. The old factory sat on the outskirts of the city, swallowed by fog and silence. Rusted beams hung like bones, the air thick with oil, dust, and the scent of decay. Chains creaked faintly in the wind, echoing through the hollow corridors where time itself seemed to have stopped. Lauren sat bound to a chair in the center of the room, wrists tied behind her back, a coarse blindfold pressed over her eyes, an irony that cut deeper than the ropes digging into her skin. Her head throbbed from the blow that had brought her here, and every breath she took carried the metallic taste of fear. She listened. That was her weapon now. Every shuffle, every whispered command, every flicker of a lighter in the dark. The men who guarded her were impatient, sloppy. Pierce's voice carried through the factory. Cold, self-assured, cruel. "She's not special," he said. "Just bait. He'll come for her, and when he does, we bury them both." Lauren lowered her head. Her pulse trembled, but not from fear for herself. Elias, he would come, and if he did, he'd destroy everything left of himself to get her back. She exhaled slowly, whispering beneath her breath, "Don't come for me, Elias, not like this." Across the city, Elias's world was collapsing. The mansion that once thrummed with power now stood in chaos. Half his men had fled, the others watched him with wary eyes. Camden's loyalty had fractured. The police were closing in, freezing his accounts, raiding his clubs, dragging his name through the dirt. And still, none of it mattered. He sat alone in his father's office, surrounded by files and maps, the screens before him showing grainy footage of the factory where Lauren was held. Each time he replayed the feed, the static grew worse, as if the world itself was warning him against what he was about to do. "She's alive," he whispered, voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "She's alive." Camden entered quietly. "Pierce wants a trade," he said. "Your empire for her life." Elias looked up, his eyes wild. "Then he gets nothing. I'll burn this whole city before I give it to him." Camden hesitated. "Boss, this isn't just about her. You're already bleeding from every side. The police—" "I don't care about the police." "What about your men?" Camden pressed. "They're losing faith. You've made this personal, and when a leader fights for love instead of power, the wolves start smelling weakness. Elias's hands clenched. Then let them smell it. He rose to his feet, towering, his voice steadying. I'd rather be weak for love than strong in his image. Camden's gaze flickered with something like pity. You sound just like him before he fell. Elias turned away, his jaw tightening. Get out. Back in the factory, hours blurred into a haze. The floor beneath Lauren's feet was cold concrete. Water dripped rhythmically from a broken pipe above. The blindfold made the darkness absolute. Yet this time, it wasn't an act. She couldn't see the faintest flicker of light, couldn't see the shadows moving around her. But in that void, she felt a strange peace. 9 years ago, she had chosen blindness to survive. Now, it had returned to her like a curse and a gift, stripping away everything but faith. Her lips trembled as she whispered a prayer, soft enough to be mistaken for breathing. If I die here, let him see who he truly is. Let him become the man I saw beneath the monster. Her voice cracked on the last word. A guard laughed somewhere in the darkness. Praying won't help you, sweetheart. Lauren didn't respond. She bowed her head, silent once more. Outside, thunder rolled again, and the factory doors rattled as the storm pressed against them, a mirror of the chaos brewing in Elias's heart. At the mansion, Elias stood before the mirror in his father's old room. His reflection stared back, bloodshot eyes, hollow cheeks, the ghost of the boy he once was. He could still hear her voice. You weren't the one who killed him, Elias. I tried to hate you. You became someone else. He slammed his fist into the mirror. Glass shattered. Blood dripped down his knuckles. He picked up the gun from the desk, loaded a single magazine, and holstered it beneath his coat. There was no plan left, only purpose. He would walk into the fire, not as a boss, not as his father's son, but as a man who refused to lose her again. Lauren stirred at the sound of heavy footsteps. Pierce's boots scraped across the floor. He crouched in front of her, pulling off the blindfold. The sudden light burned her eyes, forcing them shut again. Look at me, he said, smirking. She did, slowly. You've got a way of attracting dangerous men, he continued. First your father's enemies, now Elias. He's going to lose everything for you, you know that. Lauren met his gaze, her voice hoarse. He never had anything until he found me. Pierce's smile faltered. He straightened, motioning to his men. Get the camera. Let's make this public. Her heart stilled. He meant to use her, not just as bait, but as spectacle. To humiliate Elias in front of the world, to prove that love made kings crawl. The city hadn't seen daylight in 3 days. Rain slashed the windows of the penthouse like a punishment, wind howling through broken glass. Elias sat slumped beside the shattered desk, his gun still in his hand but his soul long gone from the fight. The empire was ash. The men who once shouted his name now whispered it with pity or fear. He didn't even look up when Camden entered, mud-streaked, bruised but breathing. You look like hell, Camden muttered. Elias gave a humorless laugh. I built it. Now I'm living in it. Camden dropped something onto the desk with a dull clack. A small, weathered violin case. The one Lauren never let out of her sight. Pierce's men missed this, Camden said. Found it in the wreckage of the car they dumped by the docks. Elias froze. Slowly, he reached for it. His fingers trembled against the old leather. He flipped the latches open. Inside, nestled beneath the violin's curved body, was a thin flash drive wrapped in faded ribbon. On it, a single word was scratched by hand: truth. He inserted it into the laptop. The screen flickered, static. Then, a man's voice, calm, old, familiar. If you're hearing this, it means the bloodline has reached another generation of monsters. Elias's breath caught. My name is Victor. I was part of the old alliance between the families and the state. I believed in honor, but corruption runs deeper than loyalty. When I tried to expose them, they sent men to silence me. Lightning flashed through the glass. Elias leaned closer, every nerve in his body on edge. If my daughter survives, if she ever meets one of your kind, tell her she's not meant to run forever. Tell her she carries proof of what this city truly is. The syndicate and the politicians, they're one beast. Only by exposing them can the next generation be free. The recording clicked off. Silence filled the room. Elias sat motionless, rainwater leaking from the ceiling, dripping beside the laptop. His chest felt heavy, but something fierce and bright ignited inside him, a clarity sharper than pain. He rose slowly. It wasn't just vengeance she wanted, he whispered. She was trying to finish what her father started. Camden looked wary. And what's that? Freedom, Elias said simply. Then he turned, eyes burning with something that looked like life again. Get the car ready. Camden hesitated. You're not thinking. I'm done thinking. Elias holstered his gun. Pierce took her because of my name. He's going to regret ever speaking it. Camden gave a grim nod. For the first time in days, they stood on the same side again. Not for power, not for blood, but for redemption. In the factory's storage hall, the storm howled like a living thing. Lauren stirred awake on the damp floor, wrists raw and bleeding. The guards were gone, distracted by the chaos Elias's counterattacks had unleashed across the city. She could hear distant sirens, the hum of helicopters, hope clawing its way through the darkness. She pulled at the ropes again, teeth gritted. The cords bit deep into her skin, but they finally snapped. She crawled toward the flicker of light spilling from under a door. Beyond it, the rain was falling in silver sheets, flooding the alley behind the factory. She stumbled outside, every breath burning her throat. Her bare feet splashed through puddles. The cold wind tore at her hair, soaking through the torn dress she wore. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending to be blind. Yet the world still blurred around her, dizzy and disorienting. Still, she ran. Her father's words echoed in her mind like the melody of an old song. You don't need sight to see truth. Elias and Camden's car screeched to a halt outside the industrial district. Rain poured down in relentless sheets. She's in there somewhere, Camden shouted over the storm. Elias stepped out, letting the downpour hit him like absolution. He scanned the shadows, lightning illuminating the factory gates. Pierce's men are gone, he said. He must have pulled out after the leak. What leak? Camden asked. Elias looked at him. The drive, her father's message. I sent it to every news channel in the city. Camden blinked. You just burned every alliance we ever had. I know, Elias said, a grim smile forming. And maybe that's the only way to rebuild something clean. Lauren emerged from the shadows at the far end of the street, rain plastering her hair to her face. She saw the black car, the faint glow of its headlights through the mist. Her heart stopped. Elias turned at that exact moment. For a breath, neither of them moved. The storm became their silence, rain cascading between them like a curtain of ghosts. Then, slowly, Lauren stepped forward. She didn't run to him. He didn't call her name. They simply stood there, the distance shrinking, every heartbeat a confession. When she reached him, her trembling hand lifted to his face. His cheek was cold, rough from days of grief. You found it, she whispered. I found you, he said quietly. Her eyes shimmered through the rain. You shouldn't have come. I didn't come to save you, he said. I came to see you. The thunder rolled, soft this time, almost reverent. She smiled faintly. You always were terrible at lying. And he laughed, truly laughed, for the first time since the world had fallen apart. The moment stretched, fragile, glowing. The rain washed away the grime and the guilt, leaving only two souls who had been blind in different ways and finally saw each other for who they were. In the distance, Camden called from the car. "Boss, news says the city's turning on Pierce. He's finished." Elias didn't look away from her. "So are we," he said softly. "Finished running, finished pretending." Lauren nodded, tears mixing with rain. The storm quieted, as if even the sky was holding its breath. They stood there in the middle of the street, drenched, trembling, and alive. No words, no vows, just the silence between two people who had finally stepped out of darkness. And for the first time in their broken, blood-stained lives, that silence felt like peace. If you had one last chance to face the person who broke your life and the one who healed it, what would you say? The harbor burned against the horizon like a bruise. Rain and gunpowder hung in the air, smoke curling off the docks in thin gray ribbons. Somewhere between the roar of thunder and the crash of waves, Elias's car skidded to a stop. He stepped out first. Camden followed, weapon drawn, eyes scanning the rows of shipping containers stacked like tombstones. The stormlight flickered off the wet concrete, painting everything in blue and silver. "She's here," Elias said. His voice was low, steady, but beneath it was the kind of fear that could split a man in two. Camden nodded toward the far end of the pier. Pierce's men. 24, maybe more. Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we finish this tonight." They moved like shadows through the rain, the rhythmic slap of boots on concrete drowned by thunder. Elias's pulse thudded against his ribs, not from fear of dying, but from the thought of finding her too late. Inside a half-collapsed warehouse, Lauren stood between two guards, wrists bound but chin lifted. Her face was pale, her soaked dress clinging to her like memory. Pierce paced before her, his gun gleaming in the dim light. "Funny," he said, smirking. "You spent 9 years pretending to be blind, and yet you saw more clearly than any of us." Lauren said nothing. Pierce stopped pacing, crouched down until his face was inches from hers. "He's coming for you. You know that, don't you? Men like him never change. He'll burn this whole city just to prove he's not his father." She met his eyes. "He doesn't need to prove it. He already did." Pierce's expression darkened. He straightened, cocking the gun. "We'll see about that." Gunfire cracked through the night. Elias and Camden hit the ground behind a stack of crates. Bullets chewed through wood, sparks flying from metal. The storm flashed again, illuminating the chaos. Shadows darting, men shouting, the smell of blood mixing with salt. Camden reloaded, teeth clenched. "You sure about this plan?" Elias rose just enough to see the warehouse doors. "No." Then he charged. The world narrowed to the pounding of his boots and the echo of gunfire. He burst through the door, firing without hesitation. 2 men dropped. A third lunged, and Elias met him with a hard strike to the jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. Pierce turned at the noise, surprise flickering across his face. "Well, well," he drawled. "The prodigal son returns." "Let her go," Pierce laughed. "You don't give orders here anymore, Moretti. You're not a king. You're a criminal on borrowed time." Elias stepped forward, rainwater dripping from his hair, the barrel of his gun unwavering. "Maybe, but tonight, I'm her salvation." Before Pierce could answer, Camden stormed in behind him, taking out 2 guards with precision shots. The room erupted into violence. Lauren ducked behind a crate as bullets tore through the air. She could hear Elias shouting commands, the clash of fists, the roar of thunder matching each gunshot. Then, a sharp click, a single sound that sliced through the noise. Pierce stood across the room, gun leveled straight at Elias. Lauren didn't think. She moved. The shot rang out. The world froze. Elias turned just in time to see Lauren stumble backward, her hand pressed to her side. Blood bloomed across her palm like a crimson flower. He caught her before she hit the ground. "No, no, no." His voice cracked, raw and desperate. "Lauren, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, pain clouding them. "You were right," she whispered, smiling faintly. "You never stopped seeing me." Pierce aimed again, fury twisting his face. "You should have stayed blind." Elias looked up, eyes burning with something primal. He shifted Lauren gently to the floor, rose, and fired. One shot, straight through the heart. Pierce staggered back, shock frozen on his face, and collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Camden rushed in, shouting orders, calling for backup. Elias knelt beside Lauren, pressing his hand against her wound, but his touch couldn't stop the blood from slipping through his fingers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "You don't get to leave me now." She managed a weak laugh. "You always were stubborn." He lifted her into his arms, carrying her out into the rain. The sky opened wider, thunder rolling like applause, as if the heavens themselves were witnessing something divine and tragic all at once. Ambulance lights glowed in the distance, blurred by the storm. Camden waved them closer. Elias climbed inside, refusing to let go of her hand. His clothes were soaked, his face streaked with rain and blood, but his eyes, they were clear for the first time in years. "I used to live blind," he said softly, leaning close to her ear. "Blind to love, to forgiveness, to what I could be. You made me see, Lauren." Her breathing faltered, then steadied. The paramedics worked quickly, shouting numbers, applying pressure, but Elias could only watch her face, that fragile, defiant beauty that refused to fade. And then, her eyes opened, clear, bright, alive. The color in them was something between dawn and fire, soft yet fierce, and she smiled weakly. "Looks like you're not the only one who can see again." Elias let out a choked laugh, pressing his forehead to hers. "Don't you dare leave me." "I wasn't planning to," she whispered. Outside, the rain began to ease. The city lights flickered through the mist, reflected in the water like 1,000 new beginnings. Camden leaned against the ambulance door, exhaling shakily. "It's over," he said. Elias shook his head, looking down at her. "No," he murmured. "It's just beginning." As the ambulance sped away from the burning harbor, sirens wailing, Lauren's hand tightened around his. The blindfold she once wore, the symbol of her silence and fear, lay forgotten on the floor beside them. And for the first time in 9 years, neither of them needed to pretend anymore. Do you believe people like Elias deserve a second chance at love? The sun rose over St. Helena's orphanage, spilling soft gold across the courtyard where time had once stood still. The old stone walls, scarred by years of rain and neglect, gleamed anew. The broken roof was repaired. The gardens flourished again. Children's laughter drifted on the morning breeze, bright, unburdened, alive. Inside the chapel, the air smelled faintly of lilacs and freshly polished wood. The piano, once worn and cracked, now shone with a new coat of lacquer. Lauren sat before it, her fingers gliding across the keys, the notes rich and unhurried. The melody was gentle, a hymn of survival and grace. Her eyes were open. She no longer pretended blindness, no longer bowed her head when she felt seen. A small boy tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Lauren, that song sounds happy. Is it because the bad men are gone?" She smiled, her eyes soft with warmth. "It's because the world found its music again." The boy giggled and ran off toward the garden. Lauren kept playing, not for performance but for peace. Each note she struck was a promise kept, each chord a wound finally healed. Behind her, footsteps echoed in the hall. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Elias paused at the doorway, watching her. His usual black suit was gone, replaced by a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The scars on his hands were still there, but the coldness in his eyes had vanished. He carried no weapons now, only a quiet strength that came from surrender. For a moment, he stood there, letting the sound of her music fill him. The same music that once hid her fear now filled his silence with life. When she finally stopped playing, he stepped forward. "You rebuilt it," she said without turning. He smiled faintly. You were the one who rebuilt me." She rose from the piano bench, brushing her hands against her dress. "The children still ask about you. They think you're a hero." He let out a soft laugh. "A strange kind of hero. The kind who destroyed everything before learning what it meant to build." Lauren turned then, her gaze meeting his, calm, steady, and luminous in the morning light. "You didn't destroy everything," she said. "You only tore down what needed to fall." He stepped closer. The air between them hummed, not with tension this time, but something lighter, the quiet recognition of two souls who had survived the same storm. "I dismantled the empire," Elias said. "Sold every club, every shipyard, every inch of what my father built. Half of it went to the victims' families, the rest—" He looked toward the window, where the children's laughter carried through. "Came here." Lauren's throat tightened. "St. Helena's?" He nodded. "A good place to start again." The morning sun broke through the stained glass, scattering colors across their faces, blue, red, gold, like the universe blessing their beginning. Lauren's eyes glistened. "You're not afraid anymore?" Elias smiled, not the cold smirk of a man who ruled by fear, but the soft, uncertain curve of someone learning to live. "I was never afraid of dying," he said quietly. "Only of seeing myself through your eyes." Her breath caught. "And now?" "Now I see what you saw," he whispered. A man trying to be better than his blood. Silence stretched between them, fragile and full. She reached up, brushing her fingertips over the scar on his cheek. "I spent 9 years hiding from the world," she murmured. He caught her hand, holding it against his heart. "Then I spent one night seeing it through you." The words lingered, a confession and a vow. Lauren blinked away tears, her voice trembling but sure. "I used to think love was something fragile, something you could lose if you looked too long." Elias shook his head. "Love isn't fragile, Lauren. Fear is. And we spent too long serving it." She smiled. Small, radiant, free. Outside, the bells of the church began to chime, carrying through the valley. The children paused their play to listen, hands clasped in wonder. Lauren turned back toward the piano. "Play with me," she said. Elias laughed softly. "I don't know how." "You don't need to." She took his hand and guided it to the keys. "Just feel it." Their fingers pressed down together, 2 notes merging into harmony. For a heartbeat, the world held still. He looked at her, and she looked at him. The man who once ruled in darkness, and the woman who once lived inside it. And for the first time, there was no fear. No pretending, no blindfold between them. Only light. Elias leaned forward, his voice low, reverent. "You showed me how to see," he whispered. Lauren smiled. "You showed me how to stop hiding." Their lips met, a kiss not of fire but of peace, the kind that stitched the world quietly back together. The bells tolled once more, and the morning light poured over them, soft and golden, wrapping the chapel in warmth. Outside, the children laughed louder. A new day had begun. The camera of the world might have once captured them as a sinner and a survivor, but now they were simply 2 souls reborn from the ashes, living proof that even the blind could learn to see, and even the ruthless could learn to love. And as their music drifted through the open windows of St. Helena's, sunlight touching every note, one truth echoed clear. Real sight isn't through the eyes. It's through the soul that chooses love over fear.